Be careful not to choke on your aspirations.
All right, Baby Nate. So what's it like to interview a living legend?
It's daunting.
It's daunting?
It is daunting.
Do you even know what the word daunting means?
It means to daunt.
No, imposing, intimidating, a lot to take on.
Sam, have you ever interviewed a living legend?
No.
Nathan, how many have you interviewed in your career with Tattooing Sons of Pop Culture?
Well, Sammy
podcast?
interviewed Steven Stanton.
Yeah, he's
one of them.
A part of the interview.
But individually, one-on-one, interviewing a living legend. How many living legends have you interviewed?
I'm trying to think.
At least two.
At least two.
I can think of two for sure.
So Mark Waid, which we're going to have in this episode, and Michael Uslan.
Yes.
Well, the father of the modern superhero movie.
Yeah.
With that. And I've interviewed
some living legends.
Yeah.
a couple, but one specifically is the Academy Award-winning editor of the original Star Wars movie, Paul Hirsch. Sam, how many have you interviewed?
Fat Zero.
But who's going to make more money in their career coming out of college?
Hopefully me.
All right, we'll continue this conversation.
Wow.
It's time for it's here.
The final
episode.
The finale.
The finale of our Kingdom Come series is finally, that's
There
what I
you
was
go.
thinking, here as BB Nate interviews Mark Waid. That's up next. This is Tatooine Sons.
We are the Reverend and the Reprobate, just two best buds interviewing people we have no business talking to. I'm Lucas Pinkard.
I'm Dan Gibson. These aren't tears on my face.
Every Thursday, we interview somebody else from our favorite fandoms and yours. You can check those interviews out on the Christian Nerd HQ Network. You can find us on YouTube at RevRep Podcast at ReverendRep.com. And if you can't remember our name, just go to BaconOffice.com. It's way easier to find new episodes every Thursday. Thank you guys for supporting Christian Nerd HQ, and check out The Reverend and the Reprobate.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody was
Pilote.
Right.
Absolutely.
The
French.
episode is the finale.
The finale. The finale.
Yeah.
And they both mean the same, like beginning and end.
Right. In
exactly.
French. Yeah. So welcome to Tatooine Sons. Hey, here we'll do this in a second. I got to explain what we were just talking about there. So a decade ago, we actually spent like
more than that.
No, it wasn't. It's a decade ago, 2014. So 9 years ago, really. We lived in an RV and toured around the country for the nonprofit that I was helping to lead. And we spent a lot of time watching Netflix and series on Netflix. And these two knuckleheads were watching it, and they kept asking why the first episode in these series was all called the pilot. And I said, that's not what it means, what it says. I said, it's a French word. And it's pronounced pilote. And they're like, oh.
And you're like, it's French for beginning.
It's French for beginning. And so it's a tradition in TV series to name the first episode of every series
the
pilote. And I came up with some big explanation. And for how long did you guys think that?
A while.
It wasn't too long, I don't think.
It was long enough.
Mom didn't let it.
The problem is I hated how much more sense it makes than pilot.
No, the pilot's what puts it on the air.
Kind of, but just pilote works.
Like a pilot puts a plane in the air?
Right.
Is that?
You never heard that?
I never heard
yeah,
that.
the pilot puts it
I
on
feel
the
like
air.
I feel like you're piloting me right now.
So that term, we start using that now whenever like we're like trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes, or like, are you piloting me right now? But you said finally instead of finale, so that's where I was getting at.
I didn't even open this episode with the right phrase. We normally open the first part with this is Tatooine Sons, the only fan podcast named a canon Star Wars creature, and to be endorsed by the writer-director of The Last Jedi,
Ryan Johnson. You're having some trouble. It's a good thing Nathan's doing the interview.
I'm all off right now. It has been a long day.
No.
But we have to get this episode out because tomorrow, at the time when you're listening to this
already
day,
out.
it's the day that the next storyline.
I think it's called Kingdom Heir. I feel like
The next,
like an heir to the throne.
right.
Okay.
Right.
it's the next stories in the Kingdom Come series are
Kind
coming
of.
out.
Yeah, as you heard from Mark Waid,
You will hear.
You will hear.
Yeah, we're this is
will
before
hear.
the interview.
You will
on,
hear
Nathan.
this. We talk about
This is the
some
pilote,
things
not the finally.
about the it's either Heir to the Kingdom or Kingdom Heir series. He's very excited about it. You'll hear about that. But there's some big things that will be happening with the series, and I don't know if you're really expecting when this series takes place in the Kingdom Come timeline.
So nice. That's like this is why he gets to interview living legends.
Right.
Do you see how he set that tease up?
That was good.
Because I know exactly what he's talking about. Because
don't.
when it was done, you haven't even listened to it yet. You haven't had the conversations with him. And he was telling me what happened, and I'm like, wow, I was
know.
surprised by that.
I'm very excited.
It's going to be it's really good. Coming into it, BB Nate, before we get to the actual interview, all right, it's the morning of. Go put yourself back in time.
Oh no, it's not that difficult.
All right, it's the morning of your interview with Mark Waid, the writer of Kingdom Come. One of only 2 comic book series that has been continuously in print for decades.
Ever since it's been released.
This and Watchmen, right? And you're getting ready to interview him. He's currently writing, what's the other series?
Superman Last Days of Lex Luthor,
Which you're loving.
which I'm loving, and he's loving writing it too. There's some awesome stuff that he talks about.
He talks about the origin of that.
Honestly, one of the most interesting parts of the conversation we had it's great.
It's that morning. You're getting ready. You're thinking about you're getting your shower. You're eating breakfast. You're trying to get some schoolwork done, and it's time. It's like getting closer and closer to interviewing Mark Waid. What's going through your head?
I'm freaked out because that day I was that entire week. Mom was babysitting.
Your nephew,
my nephew, down in
She
Fort
was out of
Lauderdale.
town,
She was
yeah.
out of town, so I was having to take on the responsibilities that she left because Sammy's busy with college and you're busy with work. So I was having to take that on and on top of school. So it was already a stressful week. But we get to Wednesday, the day of the interview, and that morning I wake up, I take the dog for a walk. I'm like just trying to stay calm, make sure I get everything done, and then I realize today's shopping day. I got to go shopping at some point, and it's also I have worship tonight at my church, which it means I got to
do
be
the
there at
sound for it,
3:50.
yeah.
So I got to do sound for that, and so I got to be there early, and so I'm trying to figure out how to fit all this stuff. So I get the dog home, I eat breakfast, I get a shower, I drive to Walmart, I get what I can there, and I get back and I get prepped for the interview, and then I do the interview. But that entire time before then, I'm just like so nervous, and I'm just trying to find ways to keep myself busy. And then when I sit down in the chair getting ready for the interview, I'm like, oh, we're here. It came a lot faster than I expected, but I just went into it, and it went way better than I was expecting. But it was great.
It's an awesome interview. I can't wait for you guys to hear BB Nate talking comic books with literally a living legend. I know we joked about that because Sam's never interviewed one. But maybe we can find one, maybe
RDJ.
I was exactly what I was going
That's what I was
to
thinking too, but I was like, yeah, no way.
Robert Downey Jr. There we go. No, it's a really, really good interview. I can't wait for you guys to hear this finally. the finale of our series on Kingdom Come, and so many of you guys have talked about how much you've enjoyed this series, and it's a big diversion for us. The style of the series, as well as the content.
It's great for me though. I love talking about comics for a few weeks.
But without any further ado, here is BB Nate's conversation with the author of the Kingdom Come series, Mark Waid.
As we all know, one of the standout elements of the Kingdom Come comic series is its exploration of generational conflict among superheroes. So what kind of motivated you to delve into this theme, and how do you think it resonates with readers so much?
Two-part question. Okay, so first part is, that's all Alex, man. I mean, the basic concept, it's many years later, the main heroes have retired, younger heroes have come to take their place, the world is falling apart. That was what Alex came to the table with, along with a bunch of sketches and some character designs and a few other things. But I mean, that was basically the baby. And so we built off of that because we were both simpatico to the message that at that time in comics, there was very much a movement among fans and younger professionals to say that the older heroes were old fashioned and, they were dull and boring and everybody should have a giant gun and, and a name like Cable or whatever. And Alex and I rejected this idea that so that's where that came from. I think that's why it still resonates, because I think that there has always been a contingent of fans, not just older fans, but even, younger fans having come into the industry in the last 20, 25 years, who still believe what we believe, that we're here for not just the dark and grim stuff, but also for the joyful stuff that the older DC heroes represent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. And that's what I loved about Kingdom Come, kind of detailing the more joyful parts of these older superheroes that we've come to know from the 60s and the 70s era of the comics. And we did get, some darker stuff with those classic superheroes, especially Batman in the 80s, but it's still always had a hopeful tinge to it. Besides, like Punisher and Cable was just dark. That's just all it was back in the 90s. And so it's really awesome to see that it was tying that in. But as you were saying, Alex Ross, an absolute master at his craft, and the Kingdom Come's often praised for its stunning realism and detail in its artwork. So how did your collaboration with Alex Ross come about, and what was it like working with him on the project?
It came about because the DC editors brought us together. He was looking for, obviously, someone who knew the DC universe, and with all due respect, you're not going to get more knowledgeable than I am about the DC universe.
Right.
And so we got together, and it was at that time it was Archie Goodwin, who was the editor at that time overseeing it, and then Dan Rassler, his assistant, who ended up overseeing the whole project at some point. And Alex and me, and we went to a restaurant. We talked about, Alex sort of laid out his vision for the story, and it sounded interesting to me, but it wasn't landing for me. I couldn't quite find because I'm always looking for my way in. Like, what connection do I have to the story? What personal connection do I have? What do I think I can bring to it? And as we were sitting there, he was talking about sort of, the wrap up and how Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman are really the only main survivors. The image of Superman putting his Clark Kent glasses back on for the first time just popped into my head. And at that moment, I thought, okay, I think this is something I can work with. So that's how it came about. And as I say, from there, Alex had the basic concept and a lot of character sketches and ideas. And so I just went to his place in, outside of Chicago, spent the weekend, and we just knocked around the basic framework of the story until we had something that was a good solid framework. And at that point, then it was just up to me to start scripting and send, and he would then send in his, his thumbnail breakdowns, and we would go over those and discuss. And I mean, discuss sounds like I'm an editor, but it wasn't that at all. I mean, basically it was just, Alex, hey, you're an artist, do whatever you want to do. And every once in a while I might have a suggestion here or there, but I can't think of anything specific, because it was really just a matter of the joy of just seeing the pages come across, at that time, my fax machine.
Yeah, the art's always been beautiful, and one of the characters that really stands out is Superman. Every time he's on the page, just absolutely amazing, and he plays a very central role in Kingdom Come. So how did you approach writing Superman in a way that respects his iconic status, that classic hopeful character, and adds depth to his character for this new universe that he was in?
I think the depth comes from us having to break away, Alex and me both, from our vision, our main vision of Superman, which is to say that Alex and I both have a difficult time accepting him as a character who has surrendered, as a character who has given up, as a character who has turned his back on his mission. But that the story required that. So then it became the long question and the long discussion process of, okay, why would that be? What could possibly cause that? And ultimately we came up with the idea that the only thing that could make Superman turn away is for the people of Metropolis, and then by extension the people of Earth, just saying to him, we don't need you anymore. And so he goes off. I think that gave him his depth in the story. I think that if he had just been the classic Superman that we know without having sunk into that, I don't say depression, but that sort of, that state of mind of, okay, well, you don't need me anymore. I guess I'll just stick around, but I'll be up here in my fortress, is what gave him his depth.
Yeah, it's difficult to see such a hopeful, joyful character be put into such a difficult, dark place in this series, but it's such a compelling character throughout the entire his arc is just fantastic. And another thing that really stood out to me in this series was the surprising religious and spiritual themes that are just present throughout the entire series. How did you integrate these elements into the story, and what message were you hoping to convey, and how did that come about?
Again, all Alex. I mean, the minister is his dad. I mean, I think this is pretty common knowledge, but the minister is his father. He looks like Norman McKay. He is a minister in real life. And so that inspired Alex to sort of do something that was a tribute to his dad. And from there, once Alex laid that out, I am personally not a spiritual person. I grew up in the Deep South with Bible thumping, snake handling, tent revival stuff. And if that is not enough to turn you away from religion, I don't know what is. So it does not play a big part in I don't look down on people, but it just personally doesn't play a big part in my own personal life. That said, I remember distinctly when I was a teenager, I read some young adult fiction, some book, and I cannot remember the name of it to save my life, about the rapture and about the consequences of the rapture and what a post-rapture world, and it terrified me. It was just the way it was written, the concept, of the rapture, just the way the story was written freaked me out when I was a kid. And so I've always been interested in that final book of the Bible, and always interested in sort of studying the pieces. And so I was able to bring that to the table. I realized that, with the basic connection, we had something we could play off of in a very religious sense. We could tie those elements together.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a way to make the story even more compelling throughout it. It adds a sense of humanity even more, with Norman McKay being kind of the lens that you see all of this story through. Just adds some connection that you can have with this series, and in a world that we'd never experienced before. And it's such an amazing story. But another character, kind of the antagonist, if you could say there really is one of this series, is Magog. And he was a significant addition to this story. So what kind of inspired his creation, and what do you think he represents in the context of Kingdom Come?
The inspiration comes from Image Comics. I mean, it really just comes from, always gun-toting, ridiculously over-armored characters. So that was the challenge, to Alex, hey, go run with this. The name Magog, obviously from Gog and Magog, comes from, again, the book of Revelation. Mm-hmm. And obviously what he represents is he's the perfect culmination, the perfect amalgam of all of these young heroes and their attitudes and their sort of laissez-faire attitude towards life and hope and heroism. Their idea of heroism being, let's kill anybody who is a bad guy, who we think is a bad guy. And again, we also knew that would be the one thing that can make Superman turn away is not just the metropolis turning its back on people, but also their acceptance and their revere, their reverence for a hero, quote unquote, who murders. And that just turns Superman's stomach.
Yeah, it was such an interesting character and added so many just amazing conversations, mainly between Superman and Magog, were just fantastic throughout the entire series. But the story's ending is both, poignant and it's up to interpretation. Just anybody that's reading it can interpret it. But if you can you share your thoughts on the resolution of Kingdom Come and what you wanted readers to take away from it?
Sure. Now we're talking before the epilogue or after the epilogue?
Oh, after the epilogue. Let's
the
go
epilogue. Then it was all about trying to infuse some hope back into this world. The idea that Superman and Wonder Woman have a child that will be trained by Batman is, the idea that, okay, they're, the older heroes have also, they've done they basically lived their last case. They've done their last big heroic act in the pages of Kingdom Come. And now this is their chance to pass the baton on to another generation that will not be Magog, will not be, all these other kids who think they're heroes but are not.
Yeah, it's such an interesting ending to see the Trinity back together, kind of just connected again. They were disconnected throughout the entire series, and now they finally are one with another. And then the world just everything. I mean, this goes back to Alex Ross's art and the epilogue. The art just seems more colorful, like there's life back in it again because they are working with one another and the world is fine again. So
and placing it in Krypton, helps that because it's all about the joy. Again, Planet Krypton, the restaurant, is nothing but a celebration of, at that time, 60 years of DC history and all the joy and all the color and all the brightness that comes with that. So that's the perfect place for that epilogue. So, and I think that the placing of it in Kingdom Come or placing of it in Planet Krypton is what helps underscore everything you just said, that it's a matter of, okay, we've turned the page and now we're re-embracing a more classic, more colorful, more hopeful, more exciting, more heroic DC universe.
And Kingdom Come was one of the first comics I ever read back when I was 12 years old. That was a lot back then, but I always, even if I just moved on from reading that afterwards, loved the series. But the one part that stuck with me was that epilogue. Just continued to remind me of the hopeful superheroes that I've come to love, even in current comics nowadays, where it's kind of a mix of those dark characters and that hopeful. I always still look for the ones that just bring hope into the world. And of course, over the years, Kingdom Come has had such an impact on the comic book industry. I mean, from the comic books themselves to the movies to everything, it's just Kingdom Come was this jumping off point for what we know as comic books now. And so how do you feel as the writer? How do you feel about that lasting impact, and how does it really, why do you think it resonates with readers so much?
I wish I understood why it resonates with readers. And it just, again, at the, sorry, like we talked about at the top of the interview, I think it resonates in the sense that readers, even incoming readers, understand that there is a place for more classic heroes among the darker heroes. Obviously Alex and I had no idea it would have this sort of impact back in the day. Most people who do stuff like this have no idea. And it is, so much of it is Alex's art. Again, if this had been the same exact story, but drawn by some, B-level artist, no one would be talking about it today. So, but I'm I'm pleased in the general sense by the fact that, it still holds a place, that it still is something that people hold up as something that they consider a classic, which is very flattering. The one place I sort of, roll my eyes a little bit is when storytellers sometimes look at it as a destination, as like, well, let's move the DC universe a little closer to that direction, or let's have stuff happen now that will presage Kingdom Come. And I'm like, no.
That's the exact point I didn't want to make.
Right. Kingdom Come it's a warning. It's not a recipe. Yes. So, but fortunately, we seem to have gotten away from that in the last few years. But there was a period in the early 2000s where there seemed to be a lot of people saying, let's head that way.
That's definitely the exact opposite of what you were meaning when you created the series. But are there any specific moments or scenes in Kingdom Come that hold a special place in your heart as being a writer of it?
There's a couple. I think that the final scene between Superman and Batman, where Superman says something to the effect of, "If you scrape everything else away from Batman, you're left with somebody who doesn't want to see anybody else die." Really helped me. I mean, I've known Batman and I've understood Batman since I was 6, but still that helped me get a more refined look at Batman. And that has certainly defined my concept of Batman going forward. There's also there's a brief sequence in the series. It's 1 page long. And, I don't think it is even particularly memorable, but it is memorable to me. There's a Deadman scene where Deadman shows up for a page. I think I don't remember whether it was Alex or me who said, we really want Deadman in the story. But the idea that he has one line of dialogue that sticks with me. Like, I was just writing Deadman. I know the character. I like the character, but I have a whole new understanding of that character when I just felt it just came out of nowhere. I wrote this line of dialogue where he says, "I always like to travel," when he's talking about not just him traveling from body to body, but also the fact that he came from a traveling circus. That's his background. And how those things tie together, the extension of traveling circus, traveling to heaven, traveling to Nanda Parbat, traveling from body to body, that this is a running theme throughout that character. It's something I didn't recognize before, but once I recognized it, it was delightful to me. And that was the fun part. It was the most fun part to me of working on Kingdom Come, was finding those insights on the characters that I've known all my life that still surprise me. Like when Aquaman says, as Control, I'm responsible for 2/3 of the world and there's only one of me. That again, that's not something I thought about before I wrote Kingdom Come, but now it makes perfect sense to me. And that informs my understanding of Aquaman going forward.
Yeah, it's amazing to see all of these superheroes come into one series, and each one doesn't feel like it's underutilized in any way. Every character has their moment that's important, and it's amazing. Even Shazam has such an important role in the series, and I didn't really understand much of it when I first read it, but rereading it over the years, I get more of an appreciation every time I read the series, just of how amazing it was. And the achievement of the series is unfathomable. But you're bringing Kingdom Come back into the world's finest series coming up here pretty soon. How does it feel to be going back to these characters?
It's daunting, but it is going back to these characters, but not in that version per se. I mean, what I've tried to make clear in the publicity is that it is not a sequel to Kingdom Come. It is more of a prequel to Kingdom Come. We do, in that first issue, leap ahead just for a couple of pages so we can see the post Kingdom Come world and our Superman and Batman from our continuity, get a glimpse of that. But then they are thrown back to a time that is, I don't know, maybe 10 years, 9 years before Kingdom Come, the events of Kingdom Come start. And we're seeing at that point the transformation of Boy Thunder into Magog. And we're seeing the transformation of some of these other classic DC characters into their Kingdom Come versions. and getting some background. So, in other words, just giving you information about the world that you didn't know before, but developmental information and background information about the world that you didn't know before.
I can't wait for it. It's gonna be a ton of fun. But you're also writing in another amazing series right now, or at least it's being released. Superman: The Last Days of Lex Luthor. I think one issue has been out so far, and I've absolutely loved it. But what made you want to tell this story that you're telling right now?
The background of this is that this is now, it has to be 5 years ago, if not longer. A young assistant editor at DC Comics, all full of joy and brightness, came to me and said, "I'd like you to take a swing at a black label Superman story for their new imprint that is basically just, here's your upscale, larger format." And I just laughed. I said, "There's no point. It'll never get published." At that time, I had been blacklisted from DC Comics, as well as a list of people as long as my arm. Had been basically anybody who was important in DC Comics in the 90s was considered out of date and not, we had somehow aged out. So management had decided I was not welcome at DC. So I said, this will never be published. You understand this? Well, you must have an idea in the back of your head. No. You haven't had a Superman idea you've been sitting on? No, because why bother? I know I'll never write Superman. And I came home from that lunch, and son of a gun, if the idea didn't fall into my head, damn it. The idea that there's, Lex Luthor comes to Superman and says, "I'm going to die. You have to save me." And Superman cannot, by his nature, there's not even a moment in the book where he hesitates. It's not, he can't ponder like every other DC character, like every other DC hero would be. I'd allow them a few pages to ponder the pluses and minuses of, a world without Lex Luthor versus, having to save him. But Superman doesn't operate that way. There's still in that first issue, the moment of clearly he is angry about having to make this choice. Clearly he is trying to get Luthor to understand that if Superman does manage to save him, that does not absolve Luthor of all, of punishment for all the things he has done. But that was the idea. So I came back and I decided to write it up, and I sent it in, and the editors loved it, which is great. I said, it'll never, you can sit on it, you can read it. It'll never be published. And so they sent it up the chain, and sure enough, it was kicked back. Nope, not interested. And so then Brian Hitch heard about this and asked me for a copy. I sent him a copy. Brian loved it. Brian loved the story, which is very flattering. And he attached himself to it. And so they ran it back up the flagpole again. And the answer was not interested. So it just languished. It was just one of those things that will never happen. And then went in the back of my file drawer, figuratively speaking, until management changed. And the book was approved like 2 days later. And so by that time I had not written a script, obviously. But I sat down and knuckled down and started scripting, and it just all fell in. It just felt so natural. It just felt like in a sense, the most difficult and yet the most easy thing I've ever written. Because it just flowed. I mean, I know these characters like I know my own family. And so it made perfect sense to me. And overall, I think what you'll see in the 3 issues is basically why I love Superman. It's through different eyes, through different viewpoints. I mean, the idea, obviously, and we've already seen this in issue 1, set it up, that this is my chance to do a travelogue throughout the entirety of the Superman universe that I love. That it's a chance to, the way the circumstances are set up, Superman has to find a cure. Well, that allows us to go to the Bottle City of Kandor. It allows us to go to the Legion's future in the 31st century. It allows us to go to the city of Atlantis and meet the Atlanteans and Lori Lemaris, his old girlfriend. And it allows us to go to other planets. And it's just, any place that's in the DC universe that is, or any places within the Superman universe, it gives us a chance to go there and me to be able to give you hopefully some insights about that place and Superman's relation to that place that you've never considered before. I know you've never considered them before because I never considered them before until I wrote them.
I can't wait for it. The first
Thanks.
issue was fantastic.
Thanks.
Just shocked me. And I truly believe it's going to be one of the definitive Superman stories from going on when it finishes.
I hope so.
Just reading it just felt like Superman. I mean, you knew first page, this was Superman, and there was no doubt about it. And it was just outstanding. I couldn't wait to read it again, which I read it again right after I finished it. It was great. But to finish up here, looking back on your work on Kingdom Come and everything you've done, is there anything you would do differently if you were to tackle the project today?
The one thing I think I would I wouldn't change the story. I wouldn't do anything different with the story, but I do think the one thing that is not in Kingdom Come that I look back and I wonder how I think it's just the overall heavy weight of the message we were sending in the story, kind of story we were telling is there's virtually no humor in that book at all. There's virtually not, with the exception of the dead man moment that is not even funny. It's just lighter. There is no shift in tonality back and forth. And I pride myself in that in my work. I like being able to go from very grimly serious to a slightly lighter moment where you think everything is, you're smiling and it's kind of funny. And then you turn the page and it's like, oh my God, I've set you up to think that we were, that this is going to be a funny moment. And then it's really not. And I don't know exactly how I would do it or where I would put it in there, but I feel like that is the one thing that is very emblematic of my work that is just somehow not in that book. I think probably because I was still fairly new at this job when I was writing it and still trying to find my own personal voice.
Well, it was as is amazing. Humor, I'm sure, would have increased some levity, but sometimes with it, the dark tone that you had with the dialogue and everything made the hope that message of hope shine through so much more from what I read. But thank you so much for doing this interview. I really appreciate it. Can't wait for the Kingdom Come event series in World's Finest and the last 2 issues of Last Days of Lex Luthor. I can't wait.
I hope you enjoy them. Thanks so much.
All right, I don't think there's going to be a dad moment in this episode.
Yeah,
probably not.
If I were to write a dad moment,
I am your father.
You don't have to write it out, but what would be the topic of the dad moment from your conversation with Mark?
I'm trying to go through everything that we talk about because I think I had I had some notes for this interview of questions I wanted to ask and everything. I think it came out to about 11 questions, and I added 2 more onto that just to fill up. So there's a lot that we went over. So I'm trying to figure out everything that just went into it, and I really feel like it goes mostly back to his conversation about the origin of Last Days of Lex Luthor and that series, mainly because he was asked, by that editor of wanting to do a Superman series for the new Black Label line, and he just said that's never going to happen, and then went home and, as you heard, it
came out. He just had to get it on paper.
He had to get it on paper. And for 4 years at this point, it was being denied over and over and over again. This story that you obviously see the passion he has in this interview for this story, and rightfully so. It's amazing. It's a great story so far. But the regime of DC just didn't want, they thought, he was the old stuff for DC, and they wanted new blood. And so, but his consistent trying again and again of trying to get it, and then eventually when the opportunity arose and Jim Lee, became the president of DC, and the kind of regime for Warner Brothers and DC all changed, they immediately, a couple days after that was announced, call him hey, we want to make that dream, story, that to happen. And right as that happened, I'm sure that was just a relief for him, because it's an amazing story that I'm sure he was disappointed he couldn't, because even if it never made it to release, I'm sure he wanted to see it, have art attached with it and be able to storyboard and be able to fully make this series, because that's just a reward for himself, seeing it fully made. I'm sure that's enough reward in itself.
It's awesome. Sam, I know that you haven't had a chance to hear the interview or anything like that with it yet, but for you as a big brother, okay, for you to look at your little brother, right? And you guys are best friends. I think I think everybody listening to the show kind of picks up on that. But for you to think that your little brother, who's 18 years old, right? Not even graduated from high school yet, has interviewed people like Brandon Proctor and who, the sound editor for the Wakanda Forever and Black Panther and what?
Rex's tails just decided to stick under the door. I'm sorry, it just threw me off guard.
But anyway, he's interviewed Brandon Proctor. He's interviewed Michael Uslan, the father of the modern superhero movie, the producer of everything Batman since 1989 with it. And now he's interviewed Mark Waid, one of the most prolific comic book writers of all time. What's it like for you as a big brother?
It's awesome. I brag on him all the time. Yeah. A couple months ago, I was at a comic shop and I was killing some time talking with the owner or whatever, and we got on the topic of the Batman movie, right? The latest Batman movie. And he's like, yeah, I wasn't a huge fan. He's like, it didn't feel right and all this stuff. And I don't remember the exact points he made, but he's like, I've been reading comics for a while, Batman comics for a while, ever since I was a kid, and it just didn't feel like Batman. This just wasn't right. And, I'm like, well, my brother's a huge Batman fan and he's read a lot of comics too and stuff. And, he thinks it's a great adaptation. In fact, he's even interviewed Michael Uslan. You know who Michael Uslan is, right? You love the original Batman films and stuff. The Michael Keaton Batman films. He's like, of course. And he's like, you know who Michael Uslan is. Well, Michael Uslan says that Nathan, my brother, knows his Batman stuff. So I think he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the Batman, stuff like that. So I brag on him all the time. I was telling friends at school that you were interviewing Mark Waid. I told Tristan and he thought it was the coolest thing ever. So yeah, I think it's incredible. It's just so cool to see him be able to have these experiences in a field, in a world that he loves. I mean, there's no denying that you and I, Dad, we love movies. We love comics.
Absolutely.
We love all this stuff, but it's just never going to equate to the way that it impacts Nathan and the way Nathan understands it and interacts with that world. So being able to see him really have some amazing experiences that most people, even in our world, will never get. It's really cool for me. I love it. I love seeing that for him.
When we finished the interview that Wednesday morning, you and I left and had to go to Sam's and pick up Sam's order. Grab some lunch because it's cheap. It's
so
Sam's.
nice. It's so cheap.
I missed the Sam's pizza. I haven't had that in a while.
Anyway, on the way, I asked you, like, if there was one other person in the comic book world that you could interview, who would it be?
Alex Ross.
And it's a pretty easy answer.
Yeah, I knew exactly. It is.
Yep. Easily.
Scott Snyder being the author of
The Court of Owls, the New 52 run for Batman.
Okay.
But Court of Owls and the City of Owls volumes, the first two volumes of that series are super important for me because when we lived in California, we lived like a 5-minute walk from a comic store. I love that. I miss it so.
Yeah, we don't live anywhere close to a comic
and it was
book
a
store.
really good comic store too. I missed that so much. But I remember we had a comic store so close, and I didn't read comics really much before then. But I went to the store and I was just hanging out because I wanted to check it out. It was a new area, and I went in there and I was kind of one of those Marvel fanboys, the people that are
because of the MCU.
I mean, I grew up on the MCU, and that was a big part of my life. And so I thought, all these people are right. DC is horrible. Marvel is the best superhero label out there. DC will never compare. And I picked up a bunch of Marvel comics, just some of the cheap ones, the first issues of some of the ones that are coming out, and I picked some of those up. And I remember it was like the Rocket and Guardians of the Galaxy and Spider-Man and I think maybe an Avengers comic and all that stuff. And I picked those up and I read them and I was just like, I don't know. I mean, they were fine, and I read a couple more issues after, and it was just like, it was okay. But then a few weeks later, I was like, I don't know. I'll give one of these DC series a try because I like Batman. He looks cool. That's the entire reason I liked Batman. I thought he looked cool. So I went to the DC side of the comics and found a trade paperback of Court of Owls, and I saw the cover and I was like, that's a cool cover, and it's the first volume, and it was like $10. It's cheap, and I get like 6 issues. It's a pretty good deal. So I pick it up and I go home, and that night I'm reading it, and I finished it like that night. I finished it so quick, and I remember I reread it the next night, and then it's in entirety, but it doesn't. That storyline doesn't end. It's in not the Court of Owls. It ends on a huge cliffhanger. Yeah. And so I went back to the store after doing some research of like what the next volume is, and I just found out it was The City of Owls, Volume 2. So I picked that up and I read it, and I'm like, okay, DC wipes the floor with Marvel when it comes to comics. So I just started reading, and that was right before the Dark Knight's Metal event series started, which is also Scott Snyder, and it just seems so wild. I mean, you have a Joker dragon with Batman and
we
gladiator
talked about this
armor.
about 3 years ago on the show when Nathan was explaining comic books to Nate, Sam, and I as part of the segment.
Insane! It's an insane series, and I kept seeing promotional stuff for it, and I'm like, okay, I gotta pick this up. So I picked up the eventually I picked up the hardcover and at a library because I was just too late on getting into the series, but I picked up some single issues of some side stuff, and I read the entire series, and I'm like, that was just wild. But it was such a fun ride. I enjoyed it so much. And so that's about a month after that series ends, the Batman Who Laughs miniseries comes out, and I picked that up in a hardcover because we were moving during that time when it was coming out, and I picked that up in a hardcover after it's finished, and that's become one of my favorite Batman stories because the good version of Batman in that story nails who Batman really is.
And those are all Scott Snyder?
Those are all Scott Snyder.
Wow.
And it's crazy because he just truly understands Batman. It's insane. And everything that he put into Batman is kind of where I go when I think of Batman, is his ideology. And then now, he's not dealing with DC anymore, which is fine. He's phased out and moved on to making some of his own stuff with his own company, the Best Jacket Press, which is his own comic book company that's partnered with Image Comics. And he just finished his Noctera series, which for a time was, when it was running, was one of my favorite ongoing series. It was crazy, it was wild, insane, just such a fun ride though, and I love the characters, and a very word heavy comic series, which you don't get much with DC stuff. There's a lot of art that relies on it, but the arts was amazing, and the entire storyline was separated into 3 acts that all kind of fit this narrative. There was a different character for each act that narrated the entire arc, and it was just fantastic. And it's just kind of become, he's such an amazing comic writer.
Maybe we can make that happen.
That would be great.
Would that be like the end of the show? Is that like Dave Filoni for me?
Yeah, probably, because I wouldn't be the comic fan I am today without Scott Snyder.
So your dream is Robert Downey Jr.
Well, yeah, but like that's even less realistic than Dave Filoni.
And I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. does interviews.
Not with us.
Dave Filoni doesn't do interviews with it. Mine would be Dave Filoni, and Nathan, Scott Snyder's at that level for you.
Yeah, that would be great.
How much more nervous would you be even than Mark
I would
Waid?
be so nervous. I'd probably write and rewrite the questions like 100 times before that. And right as we would get confirmation, I'd probably get the questions.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, that's been fun. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed this series. If you're a comic book fan and you've listened to the whole thing, share this, man. Get this out to everybody else. How can people interact with us and just kind of keep the conversation going?
Yeah, I mean, you can follow us on all of our social medias. We're over there on Twitter at Tatooine Sons.
I got my first email from Twitter today that didn't call itself Twitter.
Ouch.
It called itself X.
That's
That's
sad.
lame.
Yeah.
Lame. We're on Facebook, Tatooine Sons. We've got a Tatooine Sons discussion group too. So you can join that, and it's a little bit more intimate of a discussion, I guess. It's a cool little group in there. And then we've got an Instagram, kind of. Not really. We got a website, TatooineSons.com. So yeah, wherever you want to look for us, it's Tatooine Sons, SONS.
Yeah, and how can people help out the show, Nate?
Yeah, if you on whatever podcast app or website or whatever you're listening to on right now, you can just leave a rating, or some apps allow you to leave a full review. We would love to hear your thoughts of how this whole podcast is, what you like about it, what you might not like about it. We always want to learn how we can improve on the show, but just please give us your thoughts.
That's right. Yeah, and next week we pick back up on the remaining half, basically, of the Ahsoka series that we've been doing.
We ever figure out what series we're doing after Ahsoka?
Well, first we got to finish Ahsoka,
right?
And this is where we dive in. Now, we've touched on elements within the TV series. We've been touching on it in our previous episodes, but now we dive in, and we're gonna,
because it was just too good not to dive in.
Yeah, it's time to do it. And the fun part is getting to talk about the entire series after we've seen the entire series. I think that's going to make it good. And then after that, we had talked about doing either Loki or Invincible.
That'd be good. Either would be fun.
So we'll have to decide. Maybe you can help us figure out what you want us to do on that. Maybe as listeners, you can do that. I think that's going to cut it for this week. Anything else you guys want to say?
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Joy, please.
Yep, yep.